Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Well, as you can judge by the title, you've no doubt already seen what we've posted. And in lieu of the usual intro, I have Sam here, and I would like to ask, what the hell did you do?
I saw this moon and I was like, there are too many people there. So I did a thing.
Oh God, did you ever? Oh Christ on a bike. Right, our new story, I Believe in Myself, has just released a couple days ago, and hopefully all of you have read it. And I adore doing Lorecasts with Sam. Picking his brain is pretty much one of my favorite things to do on this show. And of course, the probably most significant story we've released so far kind of warrants a cast on its own. So let's start there. This is pretty much the most revealing piece of lore that we've released as of yet, as it pertains to the events that lead to the game. Can you give a little insight on, let's start with, I guess, the framing. Can you talk about the framing? Why set it from Arch Claudius's perspective?
Well, honestly, this short story is the one that I've wanted to tell from the get-go. Basically, before we decided that we were going to incentivize short stories, it was like, we need something from the perspective of someone who is right there at the center of things, and from the perspective of someone who honestly has perhaps been mischaracterized by myself even and the community, because people look at it and think, hey, this guy, he rules over the northern hemisphere of the moon, so he's probably bad. But it's like, no, he's not bad. I'd like to say that not everyone is bad, or that even such a thing exists when you create these stories. But I think that he is big. That's the critical thing, and to tell the story of the most impactful events, that was always hugely enticing. And just you take a little sliver of his life and you lay it out there, and you have something amazing right there. You have something that just gets you directly into the center of the lore of Ember Sword, the things that people talk about the most. So I basically said, hey, let's do this. We're not going to, be around the bush. We're not going to do the butterfly effect, approach that we did with the first short story, which was The Ways of Parting. We're going to go straight for the juicy part of this. And, here we are.
It is very on brand that it's so character centric. I mean, I've repeatedly said on the podcast that you start character first and then you create narratives around those. And it's interesting that you would say, he's not bad. Fact of the matter is, the best villains, and I'm not saying he is one, but the best villains are always the heroes of their own story. And the best characters, by extension of that train of thought, are always motivated by their own belief in themselves. See what I did there? Tying it into the title. And it's awesome to see where he's coming from, and who knows where he's gonna head in the future, right? But we know where his perspective stems from, with his development, with his ambition, with his clashes with his mentors and the system around him. It's so many directions you can take this in. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's the thing is, he has a damaged upbringing, and he has been shaped into somewhat of a right-wing fellow, because of that upbringing. But, it's nature versus nurture, and he was always going to, have these preconceived notions going into things. And, with the arrival of Starjan, we saw how things worked out, and, he's vindicated. And, that was really at the heart of it. That was the crux of it.
Well, speaking of Starjan's arrival, that sort of, the escalation is very space battle-y. I can't really think of any analogous word or phrase to call it, but This is, for lack of a better word, a very high-tech story, right? The culture and sophistication we see in it seem drastically different from what we've seen from Ember Sword thus far, with, the spaceships and the holograms and everything being very, not J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, but it feels very clean and organized.
Yeah,
Why is that?
you don't see any lens flare, in my story. I didn't describe that.
I can picture him, though.
Sorry, people. You're blinded in your minds. Why did I go that route? Well, this was always the intention that this setting at one point was very high tech and polished, and really, the idealistic American space age, that was prompted in the 1950s. And this was something that Sage and I were on the same page with all the way along. And, I think that he has plans to kind of illustrate that a bit, but it is definitely not what we see in present Ember Sword. I mean, what you see in Ember Sword is essentially the fossils of this beautiful space age. So I really wanted to elaborate on that with a story that this is almost like an entirely different world from there to here, And with the catastrophe, you see, like, just like you see the fresh wounds. Ember Sword, like the time frame that takes place over, what is it, 200 years later. Yeah, you see, the scars of it, but you don't actually see the blood. It, like, to put it in those terms. So that's like why we wanted to go that route was why I did. I'm not gonna pretend like there's someone else in there, but yeah, that's why I did it without a ghostwriter, and yeah, we I sorry. Basically, that contrast also shows how different things are and how far we fell. It adds extra breadth to the catastrophe.
Was your inspiration, in terms of, you mentioned classic American space age, were you thinking original Star Trek, that type of mentality behind, the space exploration aspect of the story, or the world in at large in general?
I was actually thinking about the idealistic space age fiction that you'd see on the cover of books, or on posters, which are like, this is where we could be in 15 years. Basically what Americans pretended like we had, which we never did. If people think that the United States had plastic houses that with the pinup wives and all that, you are gravely mistaken. That's what we wanted you to think. Russians out there. Sorry to disappoint. We weren't that great. No, basically that's my approach. The illustrations, the abstract ones, the high contrast, with very few colors. That is, I actually did not think about Star Trek at all. It did not cross my mind once, or Star Wars or anything of that matter. It was actually just those still standing frames.
I mentioned it because you said idealistic, and when I hear idealistic in space, I always think the mentality behind the original Star Trek series. I mean, right up until recently, when Star Trek Discovery went off the deep end into dog shit. Pardon my French. But yeah, I've always envisioned, space idealism being this idea that we've put aside our differences and we want to see what's out there, not to conquer the stars, but to learn and explore. So I was curious whether that was an influence going into this.
Yeah, it was basically the naivety of, hey, we just launched a rocket. Imagine a base on Pluto, like as far out as possible. The space realism, however, is a 90-year-old man who just went up into space for 3 minutes, who was starring on Star Trek.
Yay. We'll get there one day, I hope, with, less billionaire PP measuring. Well, hopefully we'll get to there. Anyway.
Yeah.
That is way off course. Haha, space reference again.
Yeah.
Going back to the story, there are technically 3 of the capitals in the story itself, in the form of Skyder, Anchorage, Burkhalter's Academy with Apsis Observatory, and Starscape flying overhead. Why do you hate Duscaron?
I don't like sand. It's cold and rough and irritating. It gets everywhere. I'm sorry. I did not have room or reason to go to Duscaron because I mean, what are you gonna do at Duscaron at this point? It's basically Arizona before the Wild West. It's kind of like going to Tucson without having any relatives there.
No,
You're not
no,
gonna have a
no.
good time. No, basically Duscaron did not have a role in this one, but don't worry, I have more things planned out for our little sandy neighbors down there. They're like we have some really cool stories about what happens after the catastrophe. Otherwise, it's basically the story of how people would walk on a road, across the desert, it's kind of up there with watching paint dry. It's that's how I describe the mystique of Duscaron at that point. Sorry.
Whatever you say now to defend yourself is going to be a moot point because every Dusker has clicked off the podcast and is sending me and you personal death threats.
Hey, it's okay. It's okay. I kind of like ravaged Ediso for you guys, so you're welcome.
That's the balance. It's all about subtext.
Yeah.
It's not about them winning, it's the others losing.
Yeah.
Which, ironically, is the cornerstone of Bulgarian mentality. We're insulting everybody at this point. But yeah, Duscaron didn't really have any... It was important to mention this, right? Because there's major representation for pretty much everybody. But, understand that narratively, Duscaron didn't really have a place in this story quite yet, or this particular story.
Yeah.
Still, there's something about the framing that I really enjoy. We talked about this off mic, but I very much lean towards fiction that is exploratory of character. That's very vaguely put, but I was envisioning a web serial called Worm, which this for some reason reminded me of, if only because, the realistic way some situations are handled, and we'll get to that, but the crux of my idea was that this story doesn't necessarily pull any punches when it comes to its character's worldview. It doesn't really fit the mold of what we've presented of Ember Sword to a certain extent, right? Because Ember Sword, on the surface, is this very bright and cheerful world. How, and this might be a decently loaded question, but do you think this might create some type of ludonarrative dissonance where people are expecting one thing from the game and they delve deeper into the lore and they get something else?
I think that the best way to describe it is you pick up a Don Bluth movie and you are expecting a very cheerful little thing when actually what you're doing is introducing your 4-year-old to the real world for the first time, concepts of death and whatnot. And I'm not saying that Ember Sword is for 4-year-olds. Please don't. No, but I think that's important to, be able to tell how you got somewhere. Basically, how did those dinosaur fossils get there? Because, they didn't just happen on their own. They used to be creatures. And you think about what I've described over the past 3 years for, the catastrophe, and it is an apocalyptic event, and that begins with the arrival of Starjin, who, is an entity far beyond our comprehension, really. Even after we help to destroy him, we still don't understand his design, and he arrives at. It's like, the wailing of an angel, piercing everywhere. There's nowhere you could hide, and it's horrifying. And that's really how you could expect something to play out when you're encountering a being who is living on another field of existence. And this is, as I said, a personal story for Arch Claudius, and what he experienced. He saw Starjan's death, and Starjan, you can qualify him as being a god, like, or something like that. Or something detached, because when you say God, you think of something ethereal and so far removed from yourself that you don't feel any empathy. When in actuality, Starjan does exist in this world, and you know, he is a being, with essentially a soul. He's, you know, and what the catastrophe means for him is, you know, like the entire annihilation of his body, of his consciousness, everything right there. That is a lot of bloodshed at the baseline, and with something so cataclysmic, things will rain down, and it will get very sticky very fast. And I think that is why it's important to edify it, because you know, until now we've described it, and I think that people may have thought of it in more of terms of magic or the rapture or something of that nature. But no, basically, how would something like this play out? How would you see an extinction level event, and what would you see? And it's I think that we all enjoy the setting of Ember Sword, but how you get there is more complicated than just saying boom, and then everything was different. It did happen very quick, but it was still, it was still a hefty pill to swallow for Thanibus.
That's incredibly well put, because it essentially means that you can engage in. I'm pretty sure we've touched upon this before. You can engage with Ember Sword's narrative on multiple levels once the game launches. There will be a setting that is inclusive to pretty much everybody, right? The gameplay is going to be, and the story by extension are going to be very accessible. But that does not mean that the world is, as wide as an ocean and as deep as a puddle. Once you delve underneath the surface, there is an incredibly deep narrative that you can engage in at your own leisure and however much you want. And it does touch upon some very, real topics, but they're handled in a way where everybody can, engage with it. And, pretty much everybody except 4-year-olds. We're banning 4-year-olds.
Yes, please don't play this game.
And they can, get something very meaningful out of it without, being scarred for life.
Yeah. And the way this is just how I am from a narrative perspective. I will tell the best story possible, and to do that, I need the means to be able to do that. And how do I put this? I won't pull any punches, but I also won't be gratuitous. I won't describe things that you wouldn't see in such a setting. This is essentially like what you'd see with a super volcano erupting. I think that would be the best, the closest event, because we haven't seen an apocalyptic comet within our lifetimes. So I use a frame of reference. I go from there, and it's just for telling the best story. It's not for being a teenage edgelord.
Of course. It's not. What we're trying to illustrate here is that everything in Ember Sword's narrative has a purpose, and it's not going to be, frivolous or gratuitous for its own sake. Everything is going to be in service to the development of the plot at large.
Yeah, there are stories you can't tell through a video game just because you'd rob players of their autonomy in the game, and the best medium for that is actually sometimes a short story, a TV series, or not. Basically exercise the medium to the best of your ability, and that's why I follow.
What I got out of this is that the Ember Sword TV series is confirmed. Thank you, Mr. Hollywood.
Oh, God damn it.
I'm not cutting this at all. This is staying in. People are gonna run wild. Hell, they might even pitch it on our behalf.
My agent calls. What did you just promise them? That's Svetlin.
He does that. Hey, the question is not what did you promise them, it's how are you gonna deliver on it?
Yeah.
Onwards and upwards. Another space reference. Well, this is pretty much all of the questions I had about the story. Would you like to add anything before we wrap up?
I was thinking about basically stealing your bit about, hey, let's hear theories, but you know what? I guess that if we went too far into the little details of the story, then I would just be robbing you all of the opportunity to stay hungry. So no, play the game and keep reading my upcoming stories as well, and whatever else I come up with.
Awesome. Well, that is everything we had for you today. Thank you,
Yeah,
Sam, for participating in the cast.
My pleasure. Like this entire time, my stupid cat was like gnawing on my foot, and so I think I did pretty well. All things considered.
You're a trooper. You're getting to be a veteran at this. Of course, Sam will return for many future casts. We have something very special lined up in the near future for you guys in terms of picking the brain of some of our resident creatives on the team, and that is as much as I will tease. So thank you once again, Sam. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Hey you made it to the end. Congratulations! That must mean you like us enough to want more, right? Well, good news! We're all over the internet. Go to embersword.com and subscribe to our newsletter for a chance to play the game early, as well as the latest interesting tidbits on the game and the team. Join our lovely Discord community over at discord.gg/embersword. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at PlayEmbersword for regular updates on what we're up to. And remember the basics. Drink water, be kind to each other, and spread the word about Ember Sword.